Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and I know at least some of you, maybe a lot of you, we shall see, have been waiting to hear about my overall thoughts when it comes to this recent Nintendo Direct that happened on June 9th. If you saw my live stream on it, you may have somewhat of an idea of how I feel about it, but I didn't give my complete thoughts and I hadn't thought things through all the way. And I know it's been a few short days since the presentation. I think this video is going to be coming out on a Friday. I'm actually entering vacation mode, so some of my videos may be edited a bit more simply than usual for the sake of getting everything ready before I go on vacation here. But yes, I have yet to actually tell you guys what I think of the overall Nintendo Direct, and I've been seeing a whole bunch of different opinions online. A lot of people very angry and upset and confused by this presentation, thinking that it was such a terrible job. Some of you, I'm sure, actually really enjoyed the presentation, but it's just kind of interesting. Whenever there is a Nintendo Direct, the one thing that you can predict, where you know you will be 100% accurate, is divisive opinions. That is always the case, at least from what we see online, on social media. But I'm here to tell you the truth about the Nintendo Direct. Not just my opinion, although yes, my opinion is greatly involved here, but I think kind of looking overall at the announcements we got in this presentation, and also including Summer Games Fest, because I do think that does count, in comparison to the Direct from last September, I think it'll become more clear just how good of a Direct this actually was. Now, do I think it was paced perfectly? Do I think there should have been more substantial first-party announcements overall? Yes, I do agree with those points, but I also think a lot of people who are complaining that this Direct was horrendous or terrible, you're kind of exposing yourself a little bit here. Because from a third-party perspective, this might be one of the best Direct presentations of all time. Like, it's actually really impressive when you kind of think about it all. Now, I'm not including every single game that was in the Direct. There's a lot of stuff there that I just don't care about, that I think a lot of you will agree, not really that big of a deal, not really worth mentioning. But there was also a lot there that absolutely is worth mentioning. A lot of games that I'm strongly considering picking up that are from big AAA studios or are really high quality games or something that a lot of Nintendo fans might actually enjoy. So here's just kind of like a quick rundown of the ones that I think are worth mentioning. Onimusha, Way of the Sword. Like, visually, I was actually very impressed with how it was looking and running on Switch 2. And I could say the same for Dragon's Dogma 2 as well, another game announced for Switch 2 during this Direct. Or another one that I'm really high on, Stellar Blade, coming to Switch 2 as well. Now, there is the exclusive Orbitals. Perhaps it's not as ambitious as those titles, but it is an interesting, unique game that I think a lot of Nintendo fans would probably find very appealing. It's definitely something I'm strongly considering picking up. But then there's also the beautiful Rayman Legends Retold. That was in the Direct. Or how about Lies of P? Lies of P, a Souls-like game. A lot of people have been anticipating this getting announced for Switch 2, and it's been announced, and it also looks pretty good. As does Devil May Cry 5, another really good game on its way to Nintendo Switch 2. But here's another one. Final Fantasy Resonance. Finally, a Final Fantasy game in the HD 2D style. This one I don't think people should be overlooking. And then there are many people who have been clamoring for more Deltarune. Well, that was in the Direct. And then there's this huge game that had so many Game of the Year nominations not so long ago, Metaphor ReFantazio. That's coming to Switch 2. That was in the Direct. And this is something we heard about from Attack the Backlog, but the Kingdom Hearts collection. Now Kingdom Hearts is available on Switch 2 natively, so you can play through them all in preparation for, and this is the second to last announcement in the Nintendo Direct, Kingdom Hearts 4. This huge epic game that's on the way, also coming to Nintendo Switch 2. All the games I mentioned, I think, are standout, impressive games, many of which are coming out day and date as the other platforms now. And let me remind you all of some of the other bigger announcements that happened over Summer Games Fest weekend. The new Spyro game coming to Nintendo Switch 2. Monster Hunter Wilds confirmed to be coming to Nintendo Switch 2 shortly after the announcement of the Ascension expansion. One of my predictions came true there. Resident Evil Veronica, this new remake, confirmed to be coming to Nintendo Switch 2 alongside the other platforms. Another big one, Final Fantasy Revelation, also coming out day and date alongside the other platforms. Some huge epic titles, and we've already seen how well Resident Evil and Final Fantasy are running on Switch 2 with their recent entries. These are huge, magnificent games. Games that honestly I think a lot of Nintendo fans would appreciate if you haven't tried these games before. And here's a few more. Alien Isolation 2, the Cuphead games. So all of this has been announced in the last week for Nintendo Switch 2, most of which coming out in 2026, many of which are AAA games that look quite visually impressive and are running well on the console, day-and-date releases here. This is a staggering amount of epic, incredible, high-quality third-party support, better than I think we've ever really seen, not since, like, the Super Nintendo? So, oh, and I forgot, not that long ago, Call of Duty was also confirmed for Nintendo Switch 2. Let me put that out there as well. So, this idea that there weren't a lot of really good games, a lot of new games I might add, not all of these are just games that have been out already, there's a lot of new stuff on the way here, most of the stuff I mentioned is new. People that look at all those announcements and say that that's bad, that it's terrible, quite frankly, I just don't think you like games outside of Nintendo if you feel that way. Now, I am a Nintendo-focused channel, but I do think that does entail talking about games coming to Nintendo Switch 2. I think a lot of Nintendo fans, they're so used to not getting third-party games, they have yet to kind of make the mental shift that there are other good games on the platform. Like, I think there's kind of a mental block for people. If a good game is available elsewhere, therefore it's not a good game on the console. That's actually kind of illogical when you really think about it. Like, it's a good game to play on the system, and if it's a good version that you can enjoy, where the performance is fine for you, and it looks great, guess what? That's perfectly fine. Now, are all these games running better on Switch 2 than the other platforms? Of course not. The Switch 2 is a handheld device, but as we've seen with a lot of recent third-party entries, they're running really well. Many people have had glowing reviews about how these latest AAA games are running on Switch 2. And these games are also handheld by being on Switch 2. That's another perk that a lot of people just kind of seem to overlook here. And just considering what I mentioned, right? I mentioned 12 games worthy of note, and by the way, the Kingdom Hearts collection I'm treating as one release, so 12 big announcements is really what I'm getting at here, that were in the direct third-party related, but then also I go back to Summer Games Fest. If I include the ones I mentioned, that would be 19. Now, maybe you want to lower that down to 18, because I was also including Cuphead, which is 2 different games, fine, but that's still pretty impressive when I consider what we got in the September Direct last year. Now, there were other games, but just me kind of taking a look at what I think is even worth mentioning: Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, Fatal Frame 2 Remake, Dynasty Warriors Origins, Monster Hunter 3 Stories, and Resident Evil Requiem. Those are great games, but that's just 5 versus 18. Or if you don't want to count Summer Games Fest, which I don't really think is fair, because it's all happening in the same window of time, 12. So the third-party presence this time around has been huge. And if you also consider this, it's kind of crazy. We didn't have a general direct earlier this year. We just had a partner showcase. So there was actually a bevy of third-party announcements that were announced earlier this year as well. And yet we're still getting staggering amounts of third-party announcements. Again, reminder, I'm not even including Call of Duty into these numbers here. And so just objectively speaking, from a quantity of high-profile, quality games perspective, this latest Direct far surpasses what we got last September. And as I've been bringing up, if you just kind of account for just announcements that have been happening lately overall, even more so. But, of course, Nintendo fans are going to lean towards the first-party announcements. I'm the same. I'm not here trying to say I'm going to buy every single one of these games. I'm going to strongly consider it, because they all look really cool, and I'll pick up the ones that make the most sense for me, and I think other people should as well if you just want to play good games, which just kind of makes sense to me. But yeah, the first-party stuff definitely is a thing we're all looking at here. And I'll say that I think Nintendo choosing to open up the Direct with Rhythm Heaven was certainly a choice, and a choice that I think turned off a lot of people. I was taken back by it as well, because I feel like usually you want to open up with a Direct with something that really catches your eye, and Rhythm Heaven is a pretty low-budget, simple style kind of game. Not a bad game. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying here. I am not saying that at all. But it's definitely not like a super ambitious, epic-looking game either, right? I think that part is clear. And so in terms of capturing people's attention to start the show, I definitely think Nintendo made a very weird choice there. However, I think there's a give and take, because by opening up the show with this, I think a lot more people are willing to pay attention to this game and give it more attention than usual. and I did come away from watching this latest Rhythm Heaven trailer actually being a bit more interested in it, like looking at the multiplayer elements of it and just considering the fun of it, and thinking about how this is very different from something like Smash Brothers or Mario Party or Mario Kart. I have been kind of thinking about how I want more games that are fun to play when I have family or friends over. I feel like after a certain point, just playing Mario Party, Mario Kart, or Smash, you kind of want to mix things up a little bit here, and so the multiplayer element to Rhythm Heaven, to me, is adding a little bit more of a draw, and it does look fun for what it is. And so I do think some points deserve to be awarded here. Rhythm Heaven, I think, showed well, even though it's a simple style, low budget kind of game. And while I'm not really big on Pokopia, I did try to enjoy it, and I did enjoy it, but just not enough to continue playing for a long time. They announced DLC, a whole expansion pass, and they shadow dropped the first wave. And I think that's actually important to consider here, because giving us content to enjoy day one, shadow dropping stuff, that's pretty awesome. And it's not just Pokopia though. Nintendo made sure to include a variety of things that were shadow dropped during the Direct, such as the Star Fox demo, which I talked about a couple days ago. And I'll argue might be the best demo Nintendo's ever put out there. It's definitely up there. It's fantastic. If you're on the fence about the Star Fox title, I strongly recommend you try out this demo. It was very good. And yet, even those two shadow drops are not everything that was shadow dropped during the Direct from Nintendo. They also announced Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, and 3 Switch 2 editions, and the first one was made available immediately, and it's not just that the game is running at a higher resolution with a better frame rate, but there's new content. It's basically Xenoblade racing content, which is crazy, funny, quirky, and weird, but that was also made available there. So Nintendo shadow dropped quite a bit. Oh, another thing that's been made available pretty quickly is this Donkey Kong challenge as well that will be available for a limited amount of time, but for those that are big into Donkey Kong, like myself, this is another fun diversion as well. So Nintendo actually offered a great deal of things that were made available very quick for people to play immediately. And I think that's something that a lot of people are probably underestimating here as well. I just listed off 4 different things that are all different Nintendo IP that gave a whole range of different Nintendo fans things to enjoy immediately. And I think that's something else people are just not paying attention to. Like, if we're talking about getting things to play and enjoy, the Nintendo Direct gave us a lot of immediate first-party things to enjoy, all fun, interesting stuff. So I think that should also be taken into account here when thinking about Nintendo's offerings. But considering the other things that were shown off, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. It's Fire Emblem, I'm happy about it. I've seen that it's kind of expensive, and I don't think the trailer perhaps really showcased just how big and ambitious and amazing this is, but Fire Emblem is pretty awesome, and this is clearly the true follow-up to Three Houses, so I have confidence in this game. But I do kind of understand how some people might have seen this and may have been a bit underwhelmed. I don't think they presented Fire Emblem in the best light possible. And then on that note, I'll also say Xenoblade Genesis, which I just talked about yesterday, I put out a big video there analyzing the game. I do think upon first glance, the trailer might not capture your attention that much, but I strongly urge you to rewatch this trailer or watch my analysis from yesterday where I talk about how, from what I've seen, this might just be the biggest open world Nintendo game ever. Like, they're doing some really, really cool things here. So this is actually a very exciting announcement, and Nintendo's giving us a little bit more of an understanding of what's to happen in 2027. And I do think a lot of people are really sleeping on Xenoblade Genesis here. This is actually a huge announcement and could possibly be my game of the year for 2027. Now, there's going to be some competition with Pokemon Winds and Waves, and I assume 3D Mario, maybe finally Luigi's Mansion 4, which wasn't in the Direct, by the way. That's one of the few predictions that I got wrong that wasn't here. I actually feel pretty good about a lot of my predictions. Not everything came right, but a lot did. But I'm sure Luigi's Mansion 4 is on the way, and on the note of my predictions, I'll talk about another one that was confirmed in the Direct. Switch Sports Resort. Not a Switch Sports Switch 2 edition, a brand new Switch Sports that's including all the prior sports, which is including prior sports from Switch Sports 1, but also a whole bunch of new stuff for Switch 2, coming out in October, which is later than I was thinking. I felt like this would have been a great fit for late summer, but whatever, it's really just coming out a month later than I expected. And I'm really big on Switch Sports, so seeing this, I think it's actually a great announcement, a brand new title coming to Nintendo Switch 2 here. Switch Sports 1 sold incredibly well on Switch 1. I imagine the Switch Sports Resort will also do something similar throughout the Switch 2 generation. Definitely a big deal, and this is looking like a far more complete package than Switch Sports 1. I think that's also something worthy of consideration here, and it's not as expensive as Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, which I think is also something we should take into consideration too. Now, something I was a little bit disappointed on is their demonstration of the Dustbloods. The Dustbloods might be maybe the second most important title coming on the second half of 2026. It's a From Software title, Nintendo's publishing it. Big deal. I'm a really big Soulsborne fan, so this is awesome that we're getting news on it. And they didn't delay the game. They didn't announce any delays. It still seems like it's coming on 2026. But we got a very, very, very short little teaser. And really all they did was announce that there's going to be a summer network test, which is exciting. That means sometime this summer, we're going to actually be able to play the Dustbloods and learn about this fully by playing it ourselves. So it wasn't a lot of information, but it does come with a promise that we'll actually get to play this, try it out later this summer, and I think that's important there. We're going to be able to play this sooner. We're not going to have to wait all the way until the end of the year. We're going to learn about it in just a few short months, if not less. Which I think also kind of goes into this sort of strategy Nintendo has done with this Direct, where they are giving us a lot to enjoy in the not-so-distant future here. And on that note, I'll also talk about the Splatoon Raiders update. They announced a Splatoon Direct is coming later this month. They gave us a little bit more information. And so there's a promise of more Nintendo news to come soon from this Direct. Looking at things from a numbers perspective here, overall, there were less announcements first-party wise in this Nintendo Direct compared to the September Nintendo Direct. I'm counting Xenoblade Chronicles 1 through 3 as one single announcement, not 3. If I did count them as 3, then the numbers would be actually pretty balanced here. But I'm also counting Galaxy 1 and 2 in the Direct from September as one announcement as well. So looking at the numbers here, we had 11 first-party announcements in this recent Switch 2 Direct and 13 last September. So technically, yes, there was less. But when you account for the staggering amount of extra third-party stuff, I do think that should kind of offset the balance at least a little bit, don't you think? I think that'd be fair. And I haven't even mentioned the most important announcement in the Nintendo Direct, and that is the confirmation of this game we've been theorizing about for years, an ambitious remake for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and it appears to be, honestly, quite obviously, the most ambitious remake Nintendo has ever made. And actually, looking at how Nintendo's been wording things, they've been referring to this as a rebirth. Ocarina of Time Reborn is their wording here. And so that does come with an implication, in my opinion, as I talked about in the Ocarina of Time remake trailer analysis a few days ago, that this is not just a remake. We're talking about structural changes here, massive design changes here. This is going to feel like a modern Zelda game, not just visually, but just overall. There's probably going to be new content here. If you're curious as to my overall reasoning on this, I'll put it in the iCard. You can watch my Ocarina of Time remake trailer analysis. But yeah, there's a lot of signs here. This is actually a huge, huge deal. Now, it was a very brief trailer. People are complaining that we didn't really get to see that much gameplay. And so maybe you might argue that that kind of is worthy of criticism. Not to mention, after that, it was so short but so exciting, and Nintendo went straight into the treehouse. I didn't care about watching the treehouse after seeing that. I skipped it. I went back, watched Star Fox stuff later. I still haven't gotten around to watching the Rhythm Heaven or Splatoon Raider stuff. I will. But I do think that was awkward, for sure. I definitely agree that that was awkward. And so I do think that the Nintendo Direct was not paced perfectly. Not that they always are. And I do think they made some weird choices. And I can understand why people may have wanted to see a little bit more of the Ocarina of Time remake, but considering everything else Nintendo gave us to enjoy in the immediate or not-so-distant future, I'm okay with this teaser for now, because we know it's coming out in 2026. We're gonna get more information on this game pretty soon. I don't want to divulge all my thoughts on this topic here, but, you know, they still haven't really acknowledged Zelda's 40th anniversary yet, and I think they probably are. We'll talk about that another time, but overall, I think this Direct, while weird in ways, when you really break it down by the numbers, there's actually a staggering amount of high-quality content that is here, and I think people that came away from watching this Direct thinking there wasn't, either A, were thrown off by the weird pacing, because there is also like sections where it's just a whole bunch of fluff that I didn't care about, and I'm sure a lot of people also felt similarly, so maybe there's something to that. But if you just kind of look at all the good, exciting announcements, there's a lot here to enjoy, and a lot to enjoy in the not-so-distant future, and almost all of this is coming out in 2026. Like, Nintendo really focused on that. There's a few exceptions, like Kingdom Hearts 4, which I think a lot of people are also kind of not giving enough weight to. That's a huge announcement coming to Switch 2. And there's also Xenoblade Genesis, which I think is also a huge game that people are undervaluing here, coming out for 2027. So those are 2027 releases, but outside of that, pretty much everything else I've talked about here is coming out in 2026. So Nintendo told us about 2026 stuff, and there's just so much here. So if I had to give a grade, I would say due to pacing issues and maybe slightly light first-party stuff, we're talking about maybe an 8 out of 10 Direct, but if you account for the unprecedented third-party support and the promise of Ocarina of Time Remake being more than just a remake, but essentially a new Zelda game that's retelling the story of Ocarina of Time, where there'll probably be a lot of new story and gameplay elements, then, you know, maybe this is more like a 9 out of 10, honestly. But again, I go back to the pacing, and I definitely was thrown off by that. So, content-wise, I think if you sift through and break it down, it's a 9 out of 10, but if you account for the weird pacing and stuff, maybe it's like a 7.5 or 8 out of 10 as a presentation, because there were certainly lulls. But the main point here is that there's a lot of good stuff coming to Nintendo Switch 2. That's what really matters. So that's a lot to be excited about. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.